44-year-old Yadira Arroyo, a New York Fire Department medic, died on March the 16th of 2017 after being run over by a thief driving her ambulance. Jose Gonzalez, aged 25, reportedly jumped onto the emergency vehicle's back bumper when Arroyo and her co-worker Monique Williams, who'd been called to an emergency involving a pregnant woman, were alerted to Gonzalez's presence by passers-by. They pulled over. A video recorded by a bystander showed Gonzalez forcing Arroyo out of the driver's seat before getting behind the wheel himself. The medic attempted to hold onto the open door but was thrown to the ground and ran over as Gonzalez accelerated. He continued to drive erratically before crashing into a parked car. Williams tried to render aid to her partner while the police took the culprit into custody, but her efforts proved fruitless. Infuriated, Williams attacked Gonzalez while he lay handcuffed on the ground. The man, who'd been arrested 31 times prior to Arroyo's death, was charged with murder, grand larceny, and operating a vehicle while impaired. In 2022, he was found fit to stand trial. Pre-trial hearings were held in the Bronx in January of 2023. Number 9. Robert Woodruff. British paramedic Robert Woodruff drunkenly crashed into cyclist Richard Goodwin on June the 26th of 2021, killing him instantly. 36-year-old Woodruff had gotten behind the wheel of his father's red Nissan Juke despite having consumed 10 pints of Guinness at a Yorkshire pub that night. He'd reportedly become obsessed with a co-worker and decided to crash her barbecue party, even though she refused to take his calls. One witness later told police Woodruff started tailgating him with the Nissan Juke, reaching up to 80 miles per hour and driving erratically moments before the accident. Woodruff made a sudden swerve to overtake the car in front of him. He then drove directly onto the opposite side of the road while distracted by his phone and collided head-on with Goodwin on his bicycle. The victim, a 56-year-old father of 5, was thrown over the hood of the car and, despite wearing a helmet, died from the devastating injuries he suffered. Woodruff's car went airborne before landing in the front yard of a cottage. Investigators found no marks on the road to suggest that Woodruff had made any attempts to brake in the moments leading up to the crash. During the trial, Woodruff continued to receive full payment from the ambulance service he worked for, even though he'd been suspended. He even managed to get a second job as a delivery driver. In spite of the pending charges against him, he was ultimately sentenced to 5 years and 4 months behind bars after pleading guilty to causing death by dangerous driving. His driver's license was suspended for 7 years and 8 months. Number 8. Yasmin Puncheon. On April the 24th of 2021, Englishwoman Yasmin Puncheon attacked 2 police officers and 2 paramedics after flagging down an ambulance in Middlesbrough. Puncheon, 24 at the time, was hysterical when paramedics came across her on the street, but when they attempted to treat her, she violently lashed out at them. She began screaming for them to get off of her while walking into the middle of the road and flagging down other cars. When the female paramedic approached her once more, Puncheon grabbed her hair and ripped out a handful before using a small blade to slash at the male first responder's face, inflicted a 3-inch cut. Puncheon fled the scene but was located by police later that night. She attempted to resist arrest, punching one officer in the face and kicking another in the chest. During a subsequent court hearing, Puncheon's attorney, Peter Hamill, assured the court his client was remorseful and indicated she'd been under the influence of both alcohol and illicit substances at the time. She was sentenced to 16 weeks in jail, followed by 18 months of probation. Judge Helen Cousins also ordered her to complete 30 days of rehab and be subjected to a 12-week curfew. Number 7. Zofia Nowaka. 19-year-old Londoner Zofia Nowaka assaulted a paramedic, a security guard, and a police officer after being taken to the hospital for a potential overdose on November the 18th of 2020. Nowaka had reportedly ingested a bevy of illicit substances as well as a bottle of tequila, and she was subsequently taken to Charing Cross Hospital. She became aggressive and hostile toward the staff immediately upon arrival. Nawaka threatened paramedic Matthew Morgan, yelling homophobic insults before attacking nurse Elizabeth Keegan. When security guard Palmer Sharma attempted to escort the unruly patient out of the building, Nawaka shifted her rage towards him and would eventually slap policewoman Angela Clift before finally being wrangled into custody. She pleaded guilty to assault as part of a deal with the prosecution in order to avoid jail time. Nawaka agreed to participate in alcohol therapy and remained on probation for a year. She was also ordered to pay each of her victims $75 in restitution. Number 6. Dallas Boyko. On September the 10th of 2022, Canadian paramedic Dallas Boyko died in a two-car collision in Alberta. The incident occurred when a 27-year-old man in a Buick Skylark crossed Highway 39 center line and hit Boyko's ambulance. No patients were on board the emergency vehicle at the time of the crash, although Boyko was accompanied by a second paramedic. By the time the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived at the scene, both the Buick's driver and Boyko had succumbed to the injuries they'd sustained. The first male responder riding in the ambulance's passenger seat was rushed to the University of Alberta Hospital, his condition reported as critical. The police suspected the Buick's driver might have been under the influence at the time of the deadly collision. Number 5. Melanie Maguire. New Jersey nurse Melanie Maguire murdered her husband on April the 28th of 2004 and discarded his body in 3 separate suitcases. The media dubbed the 34-year-old woman the suitcase killer after it emerged that she'd dismembered her 39-year-old husband, William, before throwing 3 bags containing his remains into Chesapeake Bay, the largest estuary in the United States. Maguire forged a prescription for a powerful sedative, which she used to incapacitate the victim before fatally shooting him. Investigators also discovered she'd searched how to kill a person and undetectable poisons online in the days and weeks leading up to the incident. Maguire had reportedly purchased the murder weapon 2 days before committing the crime. She'd been dating her boss at the fertility clinic where she worked, Dr. Bradley Miller, and wanted to begin a new life with her lover. Miller cooperated with authorities during the investigation. On July the 19th of 2007, Maguire was sentenced to life in prison, having been found guilty of first-degree murder, perjury, and desecration of human remains. Number 4. Deborah Darley. 57-year-old Deborah Darley, a paramedic from Staffordshire, England, was violently attacked by a drunken man while on call in 2016. Darley recounted the assault during a video created by the National Health Service as part of an initiative to keep first responders, doctors, and nurses safe. The woman, who'd worked as a paramedic for 19 years, revealed she'd been punched, insulted, bitten, pushed, and spat on while on call, but the most belligerent patient she encountered left her with a broken arm. While Darley was attempting to help an unnamed man, he violently lashed out at her, resulting in severe soft tissue damage in her arm that took several months to heal. She also had to wear a cast for 6 weeks. Darley recounted how worried she was after the incident, as the use of her hands was vital for her line of work, and the injury thus could have ended her career. Fortunately, she managed to make a full recovery. Number 3. Brenda Fox. On June the 16th of 2019, Brenda Fox was violently beaten by a drunk man she was attempting to aid in the back of her ambulance in the British town of Hitchin. Fox and fellow paramedic Ailsa White were manning the ambulance when they were called out for an emergency. The man, however, quickly became belligerent and refused to be treated. He attacked Fox, forcing her to the ground and mounting her before raining down a flurry of punches. The drunk man only stopped when police arrived and forced him off of Fox. The victim's daughter made a post on social media recounting the attack, along with pictures of Fox's black eyes and the multiple bruises she sustained. Fortunately, Fox managed to make a full recovery and suffered no long-term effects from the incident. Number 2. Joel Martinique Hall. 24-year-old Joel Martinique Hall claimed to have the coronavirus while spitting on and biting an emergency worker in Pwllheli, Wales, on April the 7th of 2020. She was arrested at the scene and charged with 11 total offenses. Following her trial, Hall was sentenced to 6 months in prison, despite it having been her first time facing the courts. Police Chief Inspector Mark Armstrong told the press that Hall's substantial punishment displayed how seriously the judges took attacks against first responders during the pandemic. Only a day prior to Hall's incident, a 30-year-old man from Staffordshire, England, named Lance King, accosted 2 nurses after being taken to the Royal Stoke University Hospital. King, who was suspected of having COVID-19, coughed on 2 emergency workers and urinated on the floor while awaiting to be treated. He was consequently sentenced to a year in prison. Before you watch our last listing, be sure to stick around in case you haven't seen our earlier video about when getting stuck goes wrong. Number 1. Lizzie Smith. In 2019, London paramedic Lizzie Smith was assaulted in the back of her ambulance while treating a man who'd been injured during a fight. The victim's identity had been kept secret from the public when the case was initially reported by the media. However, she subsequently decided to waive her right to anonymity in order to shed light on the abuse medical staff members are regularly subjected to in the UK. 25-year-old Smith had been treating the patient for a head injury and bent over to throw a disposable medical item into the bin when he allegedly groped her. She was too shocked to say anything in the moment, but later filed a police report. The man, whose name wasn't released to the media, was placed on the offenders list for 5 years and was also ordered to pay a fine as punishment for the assault. Number 11. Sydney Thoreau. While vacationing in Florida in March of 2021, Sydney Thoreau from Maryland found herself without a key to her room. She was staying at the Pelican RV Resort and, after presumably having lost her key, attempted to get into her room by climbing through a window. Unfortunately, she got stuck going through the window and died from asphyxiation. She was found at 7:30 the next morning and pronounced dead at the scene. No foul play was suspected, and Thoreau's mum said she died doing one of the things she did best, enjoying life. Number 10. Mickey O'Shea. Mum of 3, Charmaine Mickey O'Shea, was living in Australia's Gold Coast when she got stuck digging around inside a charity bin. In 2021, she was discovered at 7 a.m. on Easter Monday by someone else intending to donate clothing. Emergency services were called immediately, but O'Shea was pronounced dead upon their arrival. It remained unclear to family and authorities alike what she had been trying to retrieve. O'Shea was killed when her neck and head were caught under the bin's heavy lid. Police classified her death as a result of misadventure and found no evidence of foul play. Number 9. Ella Sankey. In April of 2014, 16-year-old student Ella Sankey from the UK dropped her iPhone while walking her dog. After talking with a friend, she intended to put her phone back in her pocket, but instead it bounced out and went down a dark drain. Determined not to lose her brand new 2-week-old iPhone, she attempted to climb in the drain feet first. Sankey couldn't fit through the hole, but once she passed her hips, she wasn't strong enough to pull herself out. Her mother came to her rescue and called the emergency services. First responders arrived at the scene and easily maneuvered her out within 10 minutes. Sankey thought her mother had been dramatic and laughed it all off, but she did run straight home to bathe. Her mother eventually found the humor in it and said that she'd never let her daughter live it down, as they'd be laughing about the incident at her birthdays and wedding. The phone was retrieved but completely ruined. Number 8. Orne Carney. Orne Carney was discovered trying to enter a house in the town of Dunleer, Ireland, in January of 2015. Carney wasn't breaking the law, as it was the home of a friend he often hung out with, whom he decided to visit. Upon realizing that the sliding door was locked, Carney tried lifting it off its tracks. After getting his body partially through, the door slingshot back and violently slammed his head against the frame. He remained in that position for the rest of the night until his friend awoke and found him. His friend attempted CPR, but Carney was unfortunately already dead. A post-mortem analysis reported he died of asphyxiation after the door hit his neck and cut off his air supply. Tributes came flowing in for the local man after reports of his tragic death were made public. Number 7. John Doe. An unusual case was reported in Barcelona, Spain, in May of 2021, when a 39-year-old man was discovered inside the decorative statue of a Stegosaurus. A young boy and his father were checking out the papier-mâché dinosaur when they smelt a strong, foul odor. The man then noticed a slit in one of the back legs of the dinosaur and peered inside, only to see the outline of a body hanging upside down. When the victim was extracted, a phone was found at the bottom of one of the back of the legs, underneath his upturned body. Authorities suspect he'd gotten stuck trying to get it back after dropping it inside. Based on the condition of the victim's body and judging by the time his family had reported him missing, police estimate he had been trapped inside the art piece for 1 to 2 days. Number 6. Ryan Kelly. Shortly after 12:15 on the night of August the 17th of 2020, a police officer on patrol heard muffled screams coming from the outdoor water park of the El Dorado Aquatic Fitness Center in Arizona. The cries were hard to locate as they seemingly projected over the entire park. It took the officer over an hour to discover that the cause was a voice coming from inside a hollow steel pipe used to support the water slide. Rescuers stayed in muffled contact with the person inside until they fell silent at around 2 a.m. It took them another 5 hours to dismantle the water slide and retrieve the body. The victim was identified as 31-year-old Ryan Kelly, whom the police wrongly reported as homeless. Kelly's family was targeted by a number of internet trolls whilst they awaited answers from the police. It's unclear why the man had gotten into the pipe or why he was in the park at night in the first place. Climbing the pipe would have been a feat in and of itself, while positioning himself in it seemed intentional. Police reports say he had broken in by climbing a security fence and that he'd been on the slide and gone swimming before getting stuck. Number 5. Stephen Winfrey. On New Year's Day 2015, Stephen Winfrey set out to hunt some rabbits in Squirrel Wood Scout Camp near Doncaster, England. Having partaken in the hobby from a young age, it was a routine activity for the 50-year-old, who also brought along ferrets and his dog to help. His family became concerned after he'd skipped lunch with them, and they contacted the police the next day. A park visitor found his body shortly afterwards sticking out of a rabbit hole at a 45-degree angle with his dog still tied up next to him. He was wedged right into the hole with only his legs, torso, and a single hand visibly hanging out. He'd tried to scratch and drag his way out as best as he could, but unfortunately, he ran out of air before he could free himself. An exact time of death couldn't be determined, and the tragic case was put down as a misadventure. Number 4. Victoria Strauss. Ohio State graduate Victoria Strauss got stuck in her car while trying to leave a parking garage in January of 2018. Driving out towards the pay parking kiosk to leave, Strauss dropped her card out her window and cracked her car door open to retrieve it. While bending down, she appeared to accidentally press on the accelerator, trapping her head between the car door and its frame. A security guard found her in the morning and she was pronounced dead at the scene when police arrived at around 5:40 a.m. Security footage showed she'd entered the garage at 11:37 p.m. the night before, and that the incident occurred soon after. A biopsy revealed blunt force trauma as the main cause of death, and that although she had no drugs in her system, her blood alcohol level was 0.221%, significantly higher than the legal limit of 0.08. Number 3. Mildred Bowman and Alice Wardle. Sisters Mildred Bowman and Alice Wardle took a vacation to Benidorm, Spain in July of 2005. The elderly pair were staying at the Levant Club Apartments and shared a room with 2 single Murphy beds attached to a large wooden unit on the wall. One night as they were sleeping, the heavy frame detached from the wall and landed on the sisters, crushing them. They died of asphyxiation, but cuts and bruises on their fingers and hands suggested they both spent hours desperately trying to escape. Their disappearance was noticed quickly when they failed to meet up with relatives on the day after their arrival. The family frantically searched for them for 5 days until resort staff unlocked the room to clean it. A coroner determined they'd most likely been trapped for 3 to 4 days before dying. An investigation into the tragic incident found that there had been no instructions on how to set up the bed and that the screws holding the frame in place were too small for the wall plugs. Nonetheless, when the case was taken to court, the judge absolved the resort owners of any wrongdoing. Today's topic was requested by Wubba Lubba Dub Dub. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Cody Caldwell. On November the 26th of 2015, in the small town of Huron in Fresno County, California, a young man by the name of Cody Caldwell tried to burglarize a home. The 19-year-old had come up with a plan of breaking into the house through the chimney, while the homeowner was on a short holiday. What he didn't account for was whether or not he was going to fit, which he didn't. The homeowner returned the following afternoon and didn't remember hearing anything out of the ordinary until he made the decision to light a fire. Caldwell, who was left cooking in the chimney, apparently started screaming while the homeowner rushed to put the fire out. Emergency services were called and Caldwell could be heard lightly breathing and moving inside the chimney. Firefighters had to dismantle the unit to get him out, only to discover that he'd already died. The homeowner didn't recognize Caldwell, but said he'd been burglarized several times recently. The final cause of death was determined to have been smoke inhalation and burns. Number 1. John Edward Jones. Like others in his family, John Jones was a spelunking enthusiast. As a child, his father used to take him and his brother out on cave expeditions, where he'd learned to love the dark, tight depths hiding under the Earth's surface. The hobby carried over into adulthood, and in 2009, at the age of 26, John and his family made a trip to the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah to bond during the Thanksgiving holidays. The caves were renowned for their narrow passageways, and within an hour of exploring, John decided to seek out a particularly small passage he remembered from childhood called the Birth Canal. When he thought he had found it, he started inching and crawling his way down the tight, vertical passage. Then he got stuck. With no room to turn around or wiggle back out, he exhaled as much as he could, then tried sliding and squeezing forward. However, upon his next inhale, he was lodged for good. John's brother tried pulling him out by the legs, but his attempts only pinned John's arms under him. It took rescuers an hour to haul people, equipment, and supplies 400 feet into the cave where John was stuck. It was 19 hours before a pulley system, which was drilled into the walls, was ready to start slowly pulling John out with a rope. By that time, his face-down position had put tremendous stress on his body and he was having difficulties breathing. He was pulled out in slow increments, each inch bringing a glimmer of hope. Then at some point during the rescue operation, part of the wall disintegrated and the pulley fell apart, leaving John to sink back into the same spot. Rescuers tried to chip away at the rock around him, but the task was fruitless. After being stuck upside down for 28 hours, John Jones died of cardiac arrest. Even in death, John was too stuck to be moved, and a recovery mission for his body was deemed too risky. The entrance to Nutty Putty Cave was permanently sealed off with concrete soon after. Thanks for watching. Do you think you would be a better cop or a better firefighter, and why? Let us know in the comments section below.